What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, and on the phone we got German Thrasher's Destruction. On the phone we are here with Schmier. Thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, great being here.
Yeah, it's so awesome to have you here. First off, the new live album that you released is absolutely kick-ass. But the real question I wanted to ask you is, now that Born to Perish is hitting a year old, and we're all under quarantine, is Destruction maybe in songwriting mode at the moment in any way, shape, or form?
Yeah, we will see. Actually, we thought that we're gonna start writing once Corona is not gonna allow us shows. But actually now at this moment we're having the first offers already for shows again, because Germany and Switzerland are both opening up the concert market, and it looks like it's gonna be shows in the next weeks. So we'll see. Actually, I thought we might start writing again this summer. It wasn't planned because we basically supposed to be on tour the whole summer, but because of Corona. But actually now it looks like we might have shows. So I don't know if we're gonna write so early, because it's way too early to start writing. Actually, we're having an album out that is now 10 months old, and usually you don't start writing so quick. I made the experience that you should usually do a full circle, do the tour, and then after the tour is done, you start writing again. Then you're also in the mood. But we will see. It depends. If we have enough spare time this summer, then we're definitely going to start writing.
Awesome. One thing I was curious about is, being that All Hell Breaks Loose is at its 20-year anniversary, maybe we would get like an anniversary tour or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's now it's the internet time, so it's crazy how many anniversaries we have every year. It's like Infernal Overkill has 35 years. Some days ago, Crack Brain came out. We have made so many albums that there's so many anniversaries going on that we have to do an anniversary tour of the anniversary tour, basically, because we almost did 20 records, so there's a lot of stuff going on. But of course, All Hell Breaks Loose is a special album. But it actually came 99, so that means it was last year already 20 years old.
Okay, well, it's old enough to drink, so we could celebrate that. But, one thing I was curious about is, having so many albums, do you take a new approach to every single album that you make, or is there kind of like a formula that Destruction tries to stick with in the songwriting process?
I mean, it always depends on how satisfied we are with the former album. Usually you go back and you listen again to what you did, and sometimes you agree it was good. Sometimes you say, hey, here and there we maybe made some mistakes in the songwriting, or we maybe not satisfied with the sound and stuff. But I think in the last years we kind of progressed again in the way we wrote the songs, and we kind of found a good mixture, the way we work together for writing the songs again. So I think from Under Attack to also Born to Perish, maybe the strongest albums we wrote in many years. Mm-hmm. And so then you kind of try, of course, to stick to certain formulas, but it's also important that you don't get too much routine. That routine kills everything. Routine is a good thing to have in certain things, but also in the productive way it can be bad, because you don't want to repeat yourself, and you don't want to do the same thing in a boring way. So we try to keep ourselves excited about songwriting. It's also why we usually don't write. There was times when we wrote a new album every 1.5 years or so, and I think nowadays we rather take our time a little bit longer, and then we make a good, strong album. So you got to be inspired to write again, and I still love writing. So I'm looking forward to when we start again. But I think at this moment I'm ready to go on tour again, actually, before I start writing again.
Of course. And when you look at the entirety of the Destruction catalog, from Born to Perish, Under Attack, and then you go to like albums such as All Hell Breaks Loose, or maybe even an album such as Day of Reckoning or something like that, is it almost kind of like a timeline or a reflection of who you are at that particular time? Do you almost look at these albums as like self-portraits?
Oh yeah, and also the lyrics that I write, or the music I write at this time, are definitely a reflection of the moment, of the times, and I always go back and listen to an album again, and sometimes I'm like, okay, was this a good album or not? And then I go, I listen. You just mentioned Day of Reckoning, which was the album where our new drummer at the time, Barber, was in the band for the first record. And I think actually Day of Reckoning is way underrated. I think it's one of the really better Destruction releases. And I just listened lately to the album again, and I was like surprised how many good songs are on the album. Actually, I think there's a lot of really cool songs in this record. And there's some other albums. When I look back now, I think it's maybe not our best album. Like Happened Spiritual Genocide. I think not so long ago, maybe it wasn't our strongest album. The band was kind of a little bit, I don't know, maybe too comfortable at the time, and songwriting wasn't so good, and I don't know what happened to this. But it's not a bad album, but it has some highlights too. But I would say if I look back, you always find an album that you like better, and an album that you think, hey, maybe at this time I didn't, I was in a difficult part of my life, maybe broke up with my girlfriend and moved out of my apartment, and actually that's true, then you find it on the album that you didn't feel so comfortable in life, and the music also is not as strong as normally because you weren't your strong self at that point. You were struggling with life. Even if music is a savior and a reliever for me, I love to write, but when you don't feel good and the chemistry is not so good in between the band members, you won't write the greatest music ever. It's a fact, If you look at history of heavy metal or rock music, the best albums of bands are made when the band was on before the peak or on peak when everything was still good, And later on when bands are too famous, too much drugs, too much fame, and everything falls apart, and the songs are not as good anymore. And I think that songs are always a reflection of how a band feels, and it's the same with Destruction, I guess.
Of course, and you've mentioned with the lyrics and everything like that being a reflection on who you are. Is there ever a time where you have lyrics before music is written, and that maybe can help determine the music?
Oh yeah, that happens. On the last album, I first had the lyrics for "Inspired by Death" because I wrote the song basically when within 1 week 4 friends of mine died.
Wow.
All musicians and great people, and they all died, and I felt so empty and so vulnerable that I started writing some lyrics, and I just wrote down some of my feelings, and when I had the song written, the whole lyrics, then I started to write the music afterwards. So this happens, but most of the time it's the other way around. We write the music first, and when I have the music, it's of course kind of easier to put the lyrics on,
Okay.
But it works both direction, and I think it's there's no certain recipe. Sometimes you do it this way, sometimes that way. Whatever works best.
Yeah, nothing could be more heartbreaking too than having the best lyrics ever, but then they're always one syllable over or under the actual arrangements.
Yeah, that sucks. I think writing lyrics is a never-ending learning process. Also, that you will be never 100% satisfied and complete. I think I'm still learning from every album we do. The way I find it easier to write and express myself, and also exactly do the rhyming right, and I like the rhyming in lyrics. I think it's a part of rock and roll for me at least. And but yeah, I think it's a challenge to write lyrics, and as I said, it's a learning process that will never stop.
Yeah, well, I think it's fair to say, even though you've been around since the 1980s and you put out so many albums, you'll never stop learning, right? That's I
think that should be the essence of everybody life philosophy. It should be something that people learn at school, as they should get tattooed on their arm that says, everything in life is a learning process. Because this is the only way we get better. The only way we can kind of renew ourselves also, and the only way we can see life as a challenge, and that the end of the road also will be still exciting, it's because life is a whole learning, and some people sometimes at a certain age, especially when you're young and successful too early, you think you know already everything about life, and that's ridiculous, because when you're young, you don't know shit about life because you have experienced nothing yet. I think experience makes us what we are, and sometimes experience, of course, is not so nice. And people can have a lot of trauma from life and stuff, but at the end, it shapes us for what we are. And that's why I think the learning process about life is the most important thing that make our life to a life with sense.
Mm-hmm. Of course. You ready for the most difficult question of the whole interview?
Of course.
Yeah. How do you know when a song is done?
I think it's the feeling. It's the gut feeling normally. Sometimes when you work too long on a song, you kind of kill the song. So I learned over the years that it's better sometimes to not do too much on a song, like leave it more raw. Sometimes on the last albums, I have some of the songs that I used my demo vocals in the end version because the demo was already good, spot on, was spontaneous and had a good feeling. It's the same with the song. Sometimes when you work on the song for too long, you maybe kill the vibe, and that's something I learned over the years, that don't touch the song when you have the gut feeling that the song is alright. I usually go back and maybe change some arrangement or something, but it's not so good when you change it around too much. I think the best songs we ever wrote are usually the ones we did very spontaneous and very much out of the gut.
Yeah, it's not like you have a preconceived idea in songwriting on what you want the whole thing. There's like maybe a lot of improvising involved, and it sounds like you have a very organic process, right?
Yeah. Also, it's about the vision. It's about the inner thoughts you have. You have an inner vision when you start a song. You have a certain melody in your head or a certain idea that you want to realize. And this inner vision also drives you to get to the right point that you finish with a song, or that you like what you do. Sometimes you won't reach it, and sometimes you're like surprised that you go there that easy. But it's always important, I think, for any kind of art that you have an inner vision of what you do. Sometimes when you have an idea for a song, you can be in the bathtub or sitting on the toilet. But then it's important to write it down.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When it comes to playing live, the last time I saw you live was on the tour that you did in 2017 with Jungle Rot and Warbringer. Fun show. And that was actually my second show ever that I was working press at. I've always thought that watching you live is very different than simply listening to your albums. For you, is there maybe a similar energy to your live presence as there is with songwriting, or are those two completely separate creative processes?
I think recording an album is more of a static thing because you're locked in a studio. You have to repeat yourself. You're trying to get an album tight and nail it down. Maybe sometimes an album production is too clinical. Also, we had our phases where also our albums were getting more clinical, and then we tried to really work on it in the studio to be more spontaneous, to record more first takes and stuff. But at the end, the live show, the essence is the essence of rock and roll. When you're on stage, it's pure, it's real, it's the heat of the moment, and and it shows also how good the band is when you're on stage. In the studio, you can also re-record everything, and you can cheat. But on live on stage, it's the moment of truth. So I think Destruction always was a live band, and. Over the years, studio recording has changed on so many levels, and I think in the last years we have found a good way to mix like spontaneous work in the studio with creative process to record stuff tight enough to make the band sound good. But that's also why I think a live album is great, because it catches the live vibe a bit more. Everything's a little bit more raw and more energetic than in a studio version, because in the studio sometimes you think too clean, you wanna make it too tidy sometimes, and that's a mistake.
Of course, and I've never really asked this before, but is there anything creative about playing live, since you are just reproducing material in a live setting? But is there anything creative that comes out of a live presence as well?
Oh, I think when you're on stage, everything is very emotional. Of course, when you play your instrument, you always play it a little bit differently because you're always in a different mindset, in a different mood a little bit. For my vocals, actually, my vocals are not just a repetition. My vocals are a very emotional part when I'm on stage. I put all my feelings, all my aggression into my live vocal performance. So I think it's every night is a little bit different. No night is exactly the same, and I think you can hear also when you're not in such a good mindset that the show is not as good performed. So I think when the band sounds really good, also that means that you're really into what you do. And sometimes you see a band that is maybe, they just sound like they're doing their job, and then that's a big difference. I think, the energy you release when you put your whole mind and your whole energy into a song is a different one than when you just repeat yourself playing a song live. That's the difference between a cover band also that just plays a song that another band wrote and repeats it, to playing your own song that you wrote with your heart blood and your blood, sweat and tears. And that you had emotions when you wrote the song. So I think that's always a different atmosphere. Also, when you have songs, you connect the songs with time eras. 1985 when you wrote this album. When you perform the song live on stage, you have those flashbacks also, of course. And that what hypes you also on the stage.
Of course. And, I love what you mentioned in covers, because I did love your Metallica Whiplash cover on All Hell Breaks Loose, which is another reason why I wanted to hear that album played in full one day.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, Whiplash is the song that basically created the word thrash. When James Hetfield sings the thrashing like a maniac, that was basically the first time we ever heard the word thrash. And I guess later on, 3-4 years later, some journalist named our music thrash metal, and I think this made, for me, Whiplash one of the total classic Metallica songs, also the riffing and everything. So when we thought about covering Metallica, it was either Whiplash or Hit the Lights that were basically our two favorite songs to cover.
Those are good choices. And I gotta ask this, having so many albums now in your catalog and the live presence, it has to get harder with every tour to put a set list together, right? Like picking which songs to incorporate?
Oh yeah, it is, but what helps is the experience that we usually switch around songs and try them live. Sometimes we try a song live and after 2 shows we kick it out again because it doesn't feel right, it doesn't work. Also, the crowd reaction is very important. When the crowd celebrates a song with you, or it just stands there and there's no reaction. And also nowadays, of course, the internet became an important part. That you see what the people are demanding, and then you kind of try the song. We usually try something in the rehearsal room first, and then we bring it into the set list. And and then when it works good, it stays there. But of course, when you have so many albums, it's not so easy because there's a basic backbone of a live set, which are certain songs that we have to play. Without those classics, people would go home really mad or sad. So, and everything in between, we try to switch. At the moment, we have 4 new songs from the new album, Born to Perish, into the set list, which is kind of, I think 4 or 5 new songs is a pretty good part of the set list. But the rest is, of course, a lot of classics, and we kind of switch around some stuff and see how the fans react. It's always a surprise to us sometimes. Different countries have different favorite songs. America usually has different songs that they like than Europe.
Mm-hmm. That's actually really interesting. You adjust the set list depending on the region you're playing in too.
Yeah. Like in the United States, for an example, our album released from Agony was super famous, and When we come to the States, people always demand songs from Release from Agony, and because it's an album that we recorded as a four-piece, it's an album that we didn't play so much in the last years. Now that we have two guitars again, of course, it's going to be easier to play also songs from this album again. While in Europe, we don't play so much from Release from Agony because it's been kind of an album that had really diverse reactions in the crowd, actually, back in the day. And it's still kind of not one of the Europe favorite Destruction albums, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fairly interesting. And then the final question I wanted to ask you is kind of coming from the era of Germany. You know, a lot of people say that, like, when it comes to thrash, you guys are the big four of Germany, along with bands such as Creator and Accept and Tankard and whatnot. Was there kind of like a scene in your region of Germany that you guys all were affiliated with, or?
Actually, the big four of Germany nowadays is what everybody calls the big four of Germany is Sodom, Creator, Tankard, and Destruction. And that would be, of course, a tour that everybody wants to see. And all those four bands basically started almost around in the same time. And when we started the scene in 1983, we had our first shows together. Also, Creator at the time was still called Tormentor. And our very first shows, actually, we met those guys when we all were like 17, 16. We were very young. And it's crazy that all those bands are still around, you know, and we're still friends. And everybody's still doing this. It's actually crazy to see that it lasted so long.
Mm-hmm. And I'd imagine for you, like, do you think that the world of thrash is in good hands now with a lot of great newer bands such as Havoc or Warbringer, who you played with on the last North American tour, or bands such as Ex Mortis or something like that? I think it's fair to say thrash is in good hands, right?
Oh yeah. We love to also bring the younger bands with us on tour. You know, we're gonna bring Warbringer also again to Europe at the end of this year, November, December. We're doing a European tour with Warbringer and a Spanish band called Crisix. They're also like great.
They're amazing. They are amazing.
Great young thrash band from Spain. We also brought Suicidal Angels just on tour beginning of this year. When we did the first part of Europe, we brought this Greek band called Suicidal Angels. I think also they're like one of the great European thrash bands. So you just mentioned Havoc, and yeah, we actually love to play with the younger generation because it's great to see that there's this high quality next level bands now there, and one day when we all gonna retire, there's gonna be the future of thrash, and that's something. You know, let's say 20 years ago, when All Hell Breaks Loose came out, there was no young thrash bands at that time. I was a little worried about the thrash scene, and it's great to see now, 20 years later, there's a whole generation of established thrash bands like the one we just mentioned, and then behind them, there's already a new generation of younger bands that are not famous yet, maybe have no record deal yet, but they're also thrashing out there, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, Paralysis is a great up-and-coming thrash band that people need to check out from New Jersey. If you are looking for new thrash bands, look up Paralysis.
Okay,
yep.
Check it out.
Yep, and of course, you gotta give it up to Power Trip as well.
Great band.
Yep. So before we go, I want to thank you so much for your time today. You announced that European tour with Warbringer and Crisix, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's going to be in November and December.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Schmier. Everybody, we are here with Schmier of Destruction. Be sure to pick up Born to Perish if you haven't already. And this is Alex from Heavy New York, and we will see you next time.